welcome everyone. Welcome to the 14th annual Bushwick Film Festival. This is an amazing panel. How's everybody doing today?
Doing well.
Very good. It's great to be here.
Excellent. Lady Phoenix, can you hear me?
Hey, Ra, how you doing?
Hey,
happy to be here. What's up, everyone?
Hey, so glad to have you here. So it's really special, love working with the Bushwick Film Festival team. We're really excited because this year, we've introduced, NFTs and crypto culture, and NFT content creators. So what's great about this panel is and everyone that's kind of tuning in, this is really covering a gambit. Like we have technologists, we have decoders, we have people behind the scenes, and with this broad spread of knowledge here, folks that are actually in the code under the hood. We have the cultural architects and creatives and artists in this space. So this is awesome. So just kind of diving in, just keeping everything in mind, because I know, all of our panelists, we've spoke on various panels into various different types of audiences. And so this audience, I would say, describe them as content creators, artists, and filmmakers. Some are fairly new, but they're very curious about the space. So I would love to collectively, because everyone asks, what's an NFT, right? So let's define it. And maybe we can start with Dan. So Dan, what's an NFT? And I think we'll all take a bit of this.
Oh, nothing like a nice, easy question to start off, hey, Ra?
Sure.
For me, an NFT is really just a form of digital ownership. And it's one of those things that's very easy to get bogged down in and start going into technical data of, but really it's a way of owning something digitally and proving you own it. And that's, for most people, unless they're going under the hood and starting to get into the dev side and the more technical aspects, that's generally all they need to know, I found.
Okay. All right. I think that is a perfect bite-sized answer. Thank you. Ravi, so let's continue. Let's tackle this as a group. What's an NFT?
Right. So, I would add on to what Dan is saying. Obviously, it's a digital way to own a digital asset, but also basically to differentiate from what Web 2.0 gave, NFT is a way to create scarcity on the internet for any digital asset. So we saw abundance in Web 2.0. We are going to see a lot of scarcity in Web 3.0.
Okay. All right. And so I speak to a lot of folks, about this, and, people, I had a conversation the other day, people pointing at things like, is this an NFT? Is this an NFT? People aren't clearly sure what is an NFT. How would you explain that to someone? So what is an NFT, Dan, in that sense? Does that question make sense? Because people aren't sure. They think the NFT is this particular thing. So maybe explain that.
Yeah. So you get this confusion. It happens a lot with people who are new to the space, and a lot of artists who are trying to get into the NFT space because they see the money and the potential benefit to them as artists. And they think that the NFT is their actual piece of art. And it's not. That the NFT is the bit of code sitting on a blockchain somewhere that happens to reference a piece of art. The example I tend to use people is that you don't necessarily own, all you're doing is saying you own a particular item. You're not saying you have any rights to it. You don't have necessarily an exclusive ability to download it. I've done that before. I've downloaded a copy of the Beeple artwork that was sold for 69 odd million and just sent it to people and said, this isn't the NFT, but it is the artwork. And the NFT is just that bit of code that sits on the blockchain somewhere and says, you own this bit of code that happens to point to this item. Sometimes they do come with more rights, but a lot of the time, there's this confusion. It's like if I went and bought a digital film off Amazon, I don't necessarily have any rights to resell copies of that or chop bits out of it and give it to people or use it in my own marketing. And NFTs are the same, that it's a bit of a gray area often as to what you're actually buying. And that's something that a lot of artists need to be aware of when they get into the space, that they're not necessarily selling the thing they think they're selling.
Okay, that Dan opens up a whole a whole can of worms and makes it abstract a little bit more. Ravi, any thoughts on that?
No, Dan kind of covered everything, right? An NFT is you could own an NFT, you could own a piece of picture, a JPEG, or an MP4. All NFT does it gives you that certificate of ownership that you either brag that you do own this original piece of art, and there are only two reasons why anybody would buy an NFT. Is because one, they really like the artist or the creator of the NFT itself and the work and all those sort of things, or they look at it as an investment piece that they think that this artist is going to be much more valuable in the future, and this particular piece of NFT is going to be more valuable, and that asset could be used. Either they could sell it or they could take it to any other a potential decentralized finance platform where they could use it as a collateral to take money.
Okay. Okay. Awesome. And one thing how I've been explaining it as well to folks that are new in the space, say for example, you have a digital file, right? You have JPEG, PNG, GIF, or MP4. You have it on your hard drive. It is a JPEG, PNG, or GIF file. If you actually mint that, right, or you put it on the blockchain, that information, it now is an NFT. So I think that's the big thing. I always encourage people to understand, so it's once you have this digital file that now has been minted and officially exists, and is on a ledger on a blockchain, now it becomes a digital asset. Now it becomes an NFT. Would you guys agree with that?
To an extent, but one of the interesting things is NFTs, and this happened with a company a while ago that started doing NFTs of tweets, that the NFT still exists even if the asset it points to doesn't exist. So people were minting other people's tweets into NFTs and reselling them, which is massively against Twitter's terms of service. So it got shut down, but the NFTs themselves still exist, but they're now pointing to blank files somewhere. And that's when it starts to get really weird, and we start to look at how the actual data itself that we're referencing in the NFT is stored, if we're storing on the IPFS or if there's some other blockchain solutions that it can be stored on, so that the asset itself that was being referenced is as permanent as the actual NFT.
Yeah, so I love it. So Dan, it's going under the hood. I'm sorry, were you going to say something, Robbie?
No, I'm just agreeing to Dan that the smart contract, which basically is the NFT, doesn't actually store the JPEG itself, right? I mean, it's actually store the unique URL where the JPEG is actually being uploaded. If the URL is pointing to a centralized, server, like the usual AWS, Amazons, or the Googles, there is a potential, possibility in the future that could be brought down. Whereas IPFS, which Dan briefly mentioned, once you upload a JPEG onto the IPFS, it stays there, forever, right? I mean, it could potentially be there forever, and the URL that is being used to mint in the NFT is what is actually the relationship between the NFT and the JPEG itself.
Okay, I agree with everything that you gentlemen are saying. And one thing I want to do, so we step back and we simplify it. So you guys are experts, and you're definitely talking about under the hood, but in a general sense, for the general public to understand, would you agree that we're talking about, if there's some kind of digital content or digital file, the concept or idea of what we're talking about is once you mint that or put that in the blockchain, that concept or that file or artwork is what we're talking about when we're talking about NFT in a general sense.
For most people, yeah, that's a pretty fair analogy.
Yeah, that's all. I just don't want to lose anybody. So what you're saying is 100% correct, but I just want to make sure people understand that. You know what I mean? So yeah. Right. All right, cool.
And also as well, the NFTs don't have to just point to digital items. They can point to real world items. So Crypto Kaijo, I think, was the first one to do NFTs linked to toys. Back about 3 or 4 years ago, they released a series of those. So it starts to get a bit weird at that point. But yeah, you can have digital ownership of the physical items as well.
Yeah. Correct. Okay. All right. Well, I hope that we didn't lose anybody at that stage. So, but let's talk about this from a creator standpoint, and we can definitely come back to that. So I want to definitely look at the, almost like the from twos, right? So we were here and now we're here because the title of this talk is NFTs in the Creative Future. So we are here now in the creative future. So, my question is, can you describe, from your perspective, where we were and where we are now because of NFTs and blockchain technology, based on your own perspective and specialty or industry that you are in, the lane that you're in? Maybe we'll start with you, Robbie.
Right. So I'm particularly focused on the film and film business. And so in the beginning of this year, I started talking to a lot of filmmakers, especially the independent filmmakers, and wanted to understand how NFTs could be used to potentially help these independent filmmakers. And the initial thought was to again tokenize, because we were tokenizing digital art. The initial thought was to tokenize movies, scenes, or short videos and those sort of things. But the real pain point that these filmmakers have is to reach the audience and to reach potential, investors, right? So what NFTs could potentially do in the future is be able, I mean, these independent filmmakers, they could potentially sell NFTs to raise money to make the next project. That's one thing. And second thing is, we talk about the actual true ownership of content itself, right? So what filmmakers could do is, right, create this scarcity driven model where they could release content to their audience and sale only release a limited number of tokens for these audience to purchase and watch the movie, and thereby be able to generate that revenue that that they could never do it in the Web 2.0 era. So what Web 2.0 did was create abundance, right? I mean, so they had to depend on advertisements and social media, affiliate programming, and all those sort of things for them to generate revenue. But whereas in Web 3.0, using NFTs, they could limit the number of tokens that they sell and price it at certain point so that they can generate the same revenue.
Okay, excellent. So, Lady Phoenix, I'm glad you were able to reconnect with us. Welcome back. So, what we're talking about right now, we're talking about like the from twos, right? So, we're talking about where we were before NFTs and blockchain technology and where we are in now currently. So, we're describing that. So, maybe since you just came back, so we can hear your voice a little bit. Tell us about where we were and where we are based on your perspective and your specialty in your industry.
Thanks, Ra. Yeah, so I'm in an old, just so you know, I'm in a really old, I'm in the middle of the countryside in France. And so I'm in this old place that's known right now as Crypto Castle. I'm at an NFT residency. So this is like very perfect conversation to be having. But for some reason, we've been having high winds. And so we're using Starlink, and all of a sudden the internet would just go out for no reason. I actually thought you booted me from the conversation. I'm like, it must be my hair. I don't know.
No, never.
So yeah, I like to speak a lot. At Universe Contemporary, we specialize in culture. So I don't like to talk a lot about like tokens and technology and things like that, because those mechanisms are constantly changing. I really like to focus on culture, because culture is that sort of that one constant variable, the variable that constantly moves culture at the level of community and commerce, right? And so where we were, in my opinion, with Web 2 was that the fan base, the conversation around the fan base was solely around commerce. Now with Web3, the conversation around the fan base is solely about community, right? Like you can't really be talking about Web3 without talking about engaging the community and like what's in it for the community. I think Web2 was about fans, Web3 is about community, right? And so the difference there is that fans essentially participate in the product after it's finished. They participate in the byproducts, right, of the initial offering, right, whatever that is. If it's a film, if it's television, if it's books, movies, art, music, whatever it is, right? But the community, like we are seeing on Discord, the community actually has a hand or a role in the shaping of that offering, whether it be how it goes to market, whether it be the auction, whether it be the actual product itself. And so that's what's different for me in Web3. In terms of a cultural shift, is that now the community actually has a voice, and that voice is imprinted on that product or that offering or that art, whatever that thing is that we're bringing to market. And that's super unique. And one might say, well, no, there was like fan engagement and feedback in Web 2, people gave their opinions. Yeah, but that was Yahoo. I forget what that Yahoo site is that people go and like rate a product or give feedback on something. That's always after the fact, right? Like you put something out and then it's just like, do they like it? Do they not like it? Well, with Web3, you're actually building side by side with community or culture, right? So they're involved in the plan from the beginning. And I think that's what's awesome about Web3 versus Web 2, because again, with Web 3, you're centering creativity and community, thus culture. And with Web 2, you're centering commerce. And that's a very extractive relationship. And I think Web 3 more or less focuses on additive relationship and building community and not just having fans.
That's awesome. Awesome. Really great points. And Dan, so from your perspective, where were we and where are we now?
So for me, we were in a place of, I suppose, digital access being the key point of it all, that we wanted to be able to access things and we weren't concerned about owning them as much. So we're moving from this physical asset, things like DVDs, CDs, tapes, that sort of stuff. That's how old I am, into the world of having access to them remotely. The problem is with that, it's all based around centralized systems. So if you want to go watch Netflix, you're relying on Netflix having a TV show. And with NFTs now, we're seeing this shift back to ownership and proof of ownership. And from a sort of cultural standpoint, it's quite an interesting one for me, that's one of the things I'm looking at, that not so much ownership of items in the terms of art or music and things like that, but in terms of ownership of identity management online and owning your own identity. And for me, NFTs form a critical part of that, and this idea of the whole metaverse of it all fitting together, where we've moved from, we're relying on these nice centralized operations because we trust them and they kind of do a good job. And now we're moving to we want to be able to own things properly and prove we own them. And when we move that into identities, it starts to get really interesting with NFTs. So, for example, from my avatar, it looks a bit like me with less wrinkles, but I'm a middle-aged white guy. I identify as a gender as a sign of birth. I'm straight. I've had all these sort of privileges that are fine. But for a lot of people, they don't have that. And in the real world, they might not be able to portray themselves the way they want to be. The idea of taking their identities online and generating their own identities we've had for a while, but now with NFTs, they've got the chance to own those identities and create something truly unique, which they can attach to a digital item and say, you know what, this is me. They can then prove it to them online as well. And in many ways, that digital identity could become a cornerstone of who they are, in much as the way real world we have passports and government issued ID. Online, the NFTs can become that form of identity. And that's for me really where it's going. It's this integrated system as well, rather than we had Bitcoin and we have all these different bits floating around that we're testing. Now with NFTs, they're starting to bring it all together into a single holistic solution where we can start to build genuine end use case scenarios for people that will solve real problems, rather than just saying, well, we'll attack one specific issue, but it doesn't necessarily work in isolation. Now we can start to bring it all together, and with the NFT side of it, you can start to own that more as well.
Really, really powerful. All right, so all the headlines, all the big news, right? Big numbers. Crypto is where you get rich. You just come here and get rich. It's crazy, right? So I'm a new creative. People are like tuning into this. The question, right? I've got all this stuff on my hard drive. I've got photography. I've got films. I'm making movies. I'm ready to get rich, right? I'm ready to jump into crypto and get rich. So I ask each of you, what are the myths? What's the truth about it? And how does one really get down in this space? We'll start with you, Lady Feeks. I know you have some strong point of views on this.
Muting. Hi, gotcha. So the question is, what are the myths, right? And then how does one really get down in the space? That's the question.
Yes.
Yeah, I think the myth is just as you said. And, I believe it was Dan who just spoke, who brought up some really interesting points, but I don't want to derail the conversation. But I think also too, there's a myth around ownership because there's this whole conversation about, well, who gets to own now? And what happens when we get off into public and private NFTs, right? And so when we get off into private NFTs, what happens to the structure of ownership and equity, right? Do we just kind of like repeat some of those same isms or systems? Do we just repeat them now that we have the technology and the opportunity to do so in a way that's decentralized? So I think that one of the myths is that NFT is going to solve a lot of the systems problems and the isms. because it's democratizing access to capital and opportunity and ownership. I don't think that it does that. Me personally, I don't think that it does that. Also me professionally, I don't think that it does that. I think it has potential to do that. But I think that it still needs the human drivers and interests to help build the potentials of NFT and the metaverse into our current systems and future systems. We need new agreements in order for these new technologies to actually take root in our lives in a way that actually bring about the type of sort of utopia and equity that we are saying that we want, right? People forget that behind these technologies are still the same minds and the same humans that build the old systems, right? And so although that NFTs are opening up new lanes for folks who didn't have a voice before, right? Like they didn't make it in the Web2 economy. They have a great chance of making it in the Web3 metaverse economy. And many folks are, quote, making it where they're able to sustain themselves. But what's pumped out there is like, oh, you know, you got to be like people and be doing $69 million worth of sales or selling $1 million, or you got to be, you know, in Twitter spaces with like 200 people, and you know, you have a bunch of people patting themselves on the back saying, oh, bro, you're a legend and stuff. And it's like, you're a legend? Like, how? Like, you literally arrived here a minute ago and already you're a legend. You're selling one NFT. Like, it's just like we have to, there's a lot of toxic positivity that goes down in the space. And so I think that's one of the myths, because people are giving attaboy and, you know, patting you on the back and telling you you're a legend and you're amazing, but there's no pause for actual critique, right? In a way that adds value to the artist, their practice, and their NFTs. And there's actually also no connoisseurship. So a lot of people think in the space, like they continue to talk, oh, it's curation is the thing. Sure, you know, we always need a curator in art. We always need a curator in culture. But the other thing that we need more desperately than that, more urgently than that, is connoisseurship, right? Because we need both the artist and the collector to understand how to create value on the artist side or the creative side, and also how to support value in the ecosystem on the patron or collector side. Without connoisseurship, we're just out spaghetti on the wall, or cats, dogs, and monkeys on the blockchain, and thinking that's going to be the thing to make a legacy of this time and of this space. And it's simply not. This is not the best we can do as a humanity, as a bunch of creative. It's not the best we can do. These are nice little experiments, primarily in commerce, right? They're experiments in capital, but they aren't experiments really in furthering creative conversation, furthering equity, right, for creatives in the space. I think a lot of the models that are out there, once again, they center commerce. They don't center culture. They don't center community. They don't center creativity. They center commerce and having the right business model to get the big paydays. And I think that in the metaverse reality and the world that many people who deal with these technologies are looking to engage in, they want to center systems, methodologies, mechanisms that allow for people to not be on the wheel, chasing, trying to be legends and apes, dogs, cats, monkeys, whatever, you know. It's, I sometimes just fall, you know, take a step back. I fall back and I look at the way things are going, and it's my professional goal, but also just my wish as a human being, that the same artists that got into NFTs in the older days, like 2 years ago, you know, the OGs like yourself, Ra, and like Coldy, and you know, the people at Dada Art who have these really incredible models like the Invisible Economy, that the artists who are just getting into NFT space will take time to have connoisseurship for themselves, to check out the history of the space. Who was here? What are they doing? You know, there's the Dada movement. The Dada art folks are actually the ones that pioneered and initiated royalties on the blockchain. How many people actually understand that and know that it is POC women who made that possible for the entire space. When you have that type of knowledge, when you have that type of connoisseurship, it changes your movements, it changes the way you bring NFTs about, and it changes the way you think about or react to the hype of making it and making, like, quote, hundreds of thousands, millions of dollars, just doing whatever to be on the hype train and be a part of the stream that's going on one direction. I think it's really important to just stop, stop and get the knowledge and incorporate that knowledge into your drops, because that's what's going to make those powerful drops, not the hype machines pumping these PFPs and these other NFTs. People don't really understand the capital machine that's behind a lot of these NFTs that are guaranteeing these prices, because it's all a game. Yeah. Right. Yeah. Absolutely. If you have connoisseurship, you know which types of art to really look out for that have not only just market importance, but actually cultural significance. So these NFTs will be around. Many of these pumped up NFTs that are around, they won't have any, like 90% in my mind. I know that seems extreme, but let's just say many. Let's just call it 50 so we don't ring too many alarms inside of the people watching this. But at least 50% of them will have no significance.
All right, so that's a great point that you brought up, you know, about on the hype on that end. And so for those that are watching who don't, you know, they haven't minted anything, you know, you have filmmakers and content creators that are looking, and based, like you were saying, Lady Fee, based on these headlines, these big numbers, people, 69 million here and all these crazy stories. Ravi, from your perspective, what are some of those myths? You're specifically, you know, creating things for filmmakers. You know, what are some of those myths they should, you know, be mindful of?
Right. So, you know, the NFT technology itself is about 3.5 years old, and it's like the early days of internet, right? So the technology needs to mature, and while the digital artists are the early adopters, this technology is going to outlive the hype, right? I mean, just like Lady Phoenix just was mentioning. So the real creators, the real artists are the ones who are going to survive, and the art is going to survive. And the technology is going to be used much beyond just art itself, right? I mean, Dan briefly mentioned that even the real world physical assets could be brought onto the blockchain. So the NFT technology is much bigger than the what we are just seeing. So the myth is that, you know, buying an NFT of a digital art and hoping that it'll be of much high value and that'll be your retirement plan, that should not be the view of any creator, right? I mean, or any buyer of NFT. For a creator itself, especially for a filmmaker, the technology is still maturing, right? I mean, there's this, the technology needs to address storage. The technology needs to address piracy, because filmmakers are fearful of piracy. The technology needs to address how the content itself is delivered, because we are all used to watching high definition films. Will a decentralized system be able to deliver high quality films on a blockchain? All those things needs to happen over the period of next months and years. And only when those things happen, and once these things settle down, that's when NFTs would be the, you know, the TCP IP of the 90s, right? And TCP IP is the one, the protocol on which the internet was developed, and NFTs and that will be the protocol on which the Web 3.0, the next 10-15 years of the internet would be developed.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Dan, over to you. You know, so again, I'm watching this panel. Man, I've got content, I've got films, I have artwork, and I hear all this hype. I'm ready to come in here and get rich. What are the myths out there? What do I need to know?
I think Lady Fee hit on a lot of it and expressed it far better than I could, to be honest, particularly from the art side. That what we're seeing now is some art that sold well because it was the first of its type, for example. But I mean, if you look back at the history of NFTs, I think the first ones that are recognized are the Pepe ones on Bitcoin back in the mid 2010s-ish. Don't quote me on that. But so, I mean, the concept has been around a long time and it's evolved to where we are now. But what we're really seeing is inflated prices because cryptocurrencies generally have gone up in price so much. And there's a lot of people now sat on huge stacks of value, particularly in the Ethereum space. And they can't really do a lot with it. So I'm in the Isle of Man where we don't have capital gains tax, so it's great. But most people do, and particularly if you're in, say, the US, as soon as you start cashing out your large volumes of currency, they're going to start looking at you. The tax office is going to want to know your trading history and stuff. So they're wanting ways to spend this currency they've got without hitting back into fiat. And that's causing this massive inflation of prices. And then you have corporations coming in as well, saying, well, actually, now this is historically important in some way. So they're buying them as well, which creates this hype cycle. But a lot of the art is just cloning other existing models. So the whole concept of algorithmically generated art, where it creates random attributes and assigns those a level of importance and so on. There's lots of projects doing that because they think, well, it worked well for Bored Ape Yacht Club and for CryptoPunks. We'll do it for our one as well. But it's just copying something new. It's not necessarily having any artistic integrity in it. There's no real artistic drive in a lot of these in the sense you'd see in traditional art. So a lot of artists getting into the space, they really need to understand that, A, they're probably not going to get any of these very large sums of sales unless they can do it in the real world anyway. You know, if you're an established artist and you swap over, yeah, people are going to follow you. So Ben Morrow, for example, is one I've been following a while who does this series, and his stuff, yeah, very well known real world artist, swapped into NFT space, did well, made sense. But a lot of artists who don't have the following in the real world, who don't know how to build an audience, then swap into NFTs and assume they're going to get these huge figure sums. And they might get lucky, but luck isn't really anything that's worth relying on in this space. The other side of it is that the sheer volume of NFTs being created daily. We see the headlines and we see all these massive figures and we see the Bored Ape Yacht Club creeping up in price into the millions every day. But no one talks about the millions upon millions of NFTs sat there that no one wants, that are in effect worthless, are being handed around for pennies, and people are sort of sitting on hoping they get lucky with. And that's the sort of area that artists really need to understand, that if you can't do it in the real world, you might have a bigger audience in NFT world, but you're not necessarily going to suddenly become rich from it. It's not a magic solution to your problems in that sense.
Okay, yeah, that's a really great point. So would you all agree that, the basic foundations of anything, right? As far as like, marketing, promotion, developing, building your audience, all of those kind of nuts and bolts things that we're used to, that definitely applies. So, another question, does NFT offer a, DIY utopia? Do you still is there still a need for an agent, a rep, consultants, all of those types of things in a space? Again, because what you hear, right? So I'm, role playing. I'm a new content creator. I have this film. I'm ready to do it. I'm ready to go in here and just do this thing. I can just drop it on a platform and I can just do it all myself. Are agents, reps and consultants needed in this NFT crypto space? What do you guys say? Maybe let's start with you, Dan, since, let you jump in that. Take this one first.
I hope there's a need for consultants because that's how I get paid. But there is, at this point in this life cycle of tech, there is still quite a higher level of entry. The technology is still new. A lot of it is still pretty bare bones. And if you want to play in the big boys game, like if you want to start building things on Ethereum or BNC, and one of the more popular platforms, there is a level of skill required to build what you want it to do. And that's why we're seeing, I was talking to a guy the other day, and an entry-level Solidity developer at the minute will be earning up to 150K. And that's just started in the last few months. That's gone up because everyone's piling into the space. Everyone wants to be doing it. And there's so few people with the skills to do it. I mean, you can do it yourself. You can, Wax is one, I built a proof of concept NFT series on there just to test the process. And it's much easier for creators to do something like that. But if you're looking at it as a financial model and something you want to build a career on, then you're going to need some support in it. And without knowing the intricacies of the art industry, I suspect things like agents, people who have the experience of dealing with artists, and particularly the people who want to buy art, once we move out of this gold rush phase of everyone just throwing money at whatever they can because they've got nothing else to do with the money and they just want to see what's going to be big next. Once that all calms down, you're going to see the sort of specialists coming back in and sort of, as Lady Fee said, curating that art and bringing the sort of quality in the art space of NFTs anyway back to the fore more. And yeah, there will be a space for those people. They'll have to adopt how they operate, but yeah, there is definitely a role for them as the entire space moves forward.
Okay, awesome. So I think what I want to do, maybe there's a couple questions, really good questions popping up, and maybe I can just kind of, knock some of these out before our time is officially up. So one was about digital tech and archivability, archiving. So what are conversations happening around archiving? What does archiving look like in this space? Maybe Ravi, if you have any thoughts on that, what does archiving look like?
Well, specifically for films, what we are building is, ability to take those catalogs of library or the libraries of movies that these big catalog owners have, and be able to tokenize them and then, sell those limited tokens. So, probably you guys must be familiar with this Disney Vault, right? I mean, Disney used to have their movies, which they used to sell and then put it back in the vault where you couldn't buy those DVDs for a period of time. So what we are also building is something similar, right? I mean, old movies that, all of us have some favorites, right? I mean, we always want to go back and watch our favorite movies, like be it the Back to the Future or the Jurassic Parks or the studios or the independent films, whatever it is. So, the filmmaker should be able to sell those, the movies, and the audience who love them should be able to buy it and keep it on a decentralized storage where they could actually go back to the movie and watch it anytime. Because what we have come to in Web 2.2 is the subscription model, right? Where we have to keep paying subscription to go and watch those contents. Whereas in the Web 3.0, what can happen is, those all old films could be archived onto the decentralized storage and people own it and they could keep going back to it whenever they wanted. So that's one way to look at it.
Oh, that's a really great point. I want to jump into the next question because I know time's clicking. Another question was about the NFTs and royalty aspect. Anyone want to talk about a little bit more about the realities of that and a little bit on how that works? I think Lady Phoenix, I think you would definitely have some great insight as far as royalties. I know you do a lot of that work. So someone's asking about royalties, like how does that aspect work for artists?
Yeah, I think that here's the reality, guys. I don't want to hurt anybody's feelings here, but right now there's not royalties in the blockchain. There's people who are coming up with little neat ways, but across or multi-chain enforcement is impossible. Even if you go on OpenSea and you have your royalties there and you think, okay, it's OpenSea to OpenSea, if they choose to remove.
I think the connection is slowing down.
Do anything about it.
Yeah, I think the connection is slowing down. It looks like a historic house or that you're in.
Oh.
Maybe it's.
How about now?
Sounds better now.
Sounds better? Okay. So what I'm saying is, even if you sell your NFTs in OpenSea, if they decide to remove it from OpenSea and sell it privately, they've just, gone off and not paid you your royalty if they decide to do it privately. So I think one way around that, and one way that you can help with that. So I also want to talk to you about the teams. I think this is an important conversation. I think two things. If you're a novice, you're a complete newbie, you're getting into the space, you don't have a lot of money, you don't need a team straight away. What you need to do is connect with your community. So I would say build community, connect with your audience. Build community, connect with your audience. Lady Fee, how do you do that? Just go to YouTube, look it up. The University of YouTube will give you all the free game you need to get started, right? These are people starting on zero. If you're an artist, you've got a little bit of juice, you've got some swag, you've got a community, you're tapped in with your audience, you can go on and decide to sell like a pack of shoelaces, people are gonna buy it, you have that effect, boom. You know that perhaps you can sell your Genesis NFTs or some other NFTs to the audience. You also don't need a team. You need to stay tapped in with your community. You offer some rares, some one-of-ones. Don't go out thinking you have to do like unlimited editions where people are buying thousands of NFTs. So you can say how like you made $1 million on your first drop or $100,000 in your first drop. Don't ever let commerce be the aim. Let creativity be the aim. Let innovation be the aim. A lot of people they rode the hype train. They put unlimited editions of their NFTs to OpenSea. Well, those who were a bit more savvy got in on these NFTs that were all hyped up, flipped them at high prices, but did so outside of the marketplace, such as OpenSea. They sold them privately. Now they don't have to run you that royalty. What are you going to do? Right? Mm-hmm. So from that level, once again, this is connoisseurship. You have to understand the space that you're in. This is art business, right? So at a certain point, you do need a team. You do need a business manager, a studio manager, someone who will help you manage the business that you're in so that you're able to continue being creative. It's hard for artists to both focus on being, their own business manager and also on being the creative, making the work. When you get to a certain level, there's certain opportunities coming in. You want to get with an advisor, someone who can help you navigate opportunities, negotiate contracts for yourself, negotiate opportunity for yourself. How do you find that person, Lady Phoenix? Tap in with your community, right? Continue to build your audience. Show up for other people and celebrate their victories too. There are artists that you like. Maybe you don't know about the artists you like. Cool, go out there and explore NFTs. Go on every single platform and have a look of what's out there. Tap in with somebody, send them a note. Man, I really love your work. This was moving. This was beautiful. Or this was inspiring. Or, hey, this is just so fresh. I really love what you did, and then keep tapping in with people and genuinely connecting and reaching out to people in appreciation for them, their work, and what they're doing. Make friends, but in a way that's authentic, right? At a certain level, you need to grow your team or else you can't grow your business. Right? And sometimes that team looks like the friend or the friend groups or the community that you have around you. Oftentimes when artists launch, it's the community, the friend group or other artists, other digital artists, other artists making NFTs that are buying the work. It's not this whole collective contingency, right? So community is vital. Another thing is know what your narrative is. What's your story personally, right? But what's the story of the work that you're putting out there? Narrative is another kind of like key selling point or engagement point for these NFTs. Okay, now Rob, back to this idea of royalties. Part of how royalties are going to be affected is by your drop strategy and by the mechanism by which you offer these NFTs or produce these NFTs. In order to have a proper drop strategy and mechanism for producing NFTs, sometimes you need extra support. That can look like, again, talking to other artists in the space, look like talking to an advisor. We are the McKinsey of the metaverse at Universe Contemporary. We are advisors. So we advise creatively on a lot of NFTs, which is what I'm telling you in terms of, not getting your royalty, you can set up both your smart contracts and the NFT and the drop in such a way that people won't have the opportunity to not run you your royalty. They won't even think about taking your NFT outside of the marketplace and selling it privately. If they do, either that collector or whomever is involved with that exchange has a level of integrity, because you have the level of integrity in your practice. They'll hit you up and be like, hey, I sold your work privately, or I received your work from a private sale. I want to run you your commission. That happens. But it's the way you set up your practice. It's like that saying, well, the way my life is set up, X, Y, and Z, same for your practice. The way your practice is set up, people are not going to engage in that behavior with you. So that's royalties.
That's awesome. Thank you so much. So we don't have too much time, but so again, I'm putting myself in the position of the person who's watching this. I'm getting all this content. This is like heavy info. We're going under the hood. We're talking about culture, community. We're talking about all these things, right? So again, here I am. I'm listening to these amazing panelists. I have content. All right. So I want to know straight to the point, how can you help me? Each of you provide certain services and you do things in this space. I want to know, like, how can you help me? Ravi, I'm a filmmaker. I have content. I'm listening to you. What are you doing that can add value for me?
All right, so we're building this platform called filmrare.com, and we are planning to launch it by end of this month or the beginning of November. So what, as a content creator, you could do is come and create. We are building the self-distribution model, right? I mean, we talked about this before. So if you have an audience, if you are connected with your audience, if you have a limited number of audience, you are a niche filmmaker, even so, you could come to filmrare.com, tokenize your movie, create a limited number of tokens. Let's say that you're minting 10,000 tokens, but then release those tokens in batches of, let's say, 100, 500, create the scarcity onto the platform and let the audience buy those tokens. So when an audience, when one of your fan buys a token, he or she gets lifetime access to your content, right? I mean, we are taking the best of theatrical, which is exclusivity, the best of DVD, which is true ownership, and the best of streaming, which is convenience of watching anywhere. So by putting all these things together, we're building this filmrare.com.
That sounds awesome. Love the elevator pitch, concise, right to the point. Beautiful, Ravi. Thank you. Dan, I'm a content creator. Is there anything that you're doing? You said you're a consultant. Like, how can you help me?
Just come and talk to me is my I mean, I do a lot of work across the blockchain space. So for paid work, I'll tend to be working things like DeFi and cryptocurrencies and at the base layer stuff, but I love talking to people in the space about this stuff. I mean, like the fake fluencer I got into because I was talking to Rich and the guys about it. Same with the sequel I work on at the minute. And I'm always happy to talk to this about people. I've launched my own NFT series before. I've helped people build and design them. I've helped people design marketing stacks for it and run entire marketing campaigns around it. And if people want to come with me and they've got a couple of questions, they've got an idea, I'm normally pretty happy to talk to them about it. Particularly if it's something interesting. That's what I love in the space. I mean, that's, again, with the fake fluencer, that was something that was so bonkers. I thought, there's no way I am not being involved in this. If someone comes to talk to me and says, I've got a really crazy project idea, I'm really interested in this. Yeah, I'll happily talk them through it. And even if I don't work with them, I can normally point them in the right direction. So, this is what you need to be looking at. This is what you need to understand about it before you even get started. Here's a couple of resources or a few other people you might want to know in the industry who can, again, guide you on that path a bit. Because for me, it's this idea of self-ownership, that it's about people controlling their own work and controlling what they want to do with it and how they want to approach it. So for me, it's more about education, that they've got to understand what they're doing and why they're doing it. And rather than someone coming to me and saying, right, I want to do this, and me going, right, it'll be X amount and I'll do it all for you. I want them to go off and do it and understand what they're doing and really get that appreciation behind how it all works.
Beautiful, beautiful. I love it. Lady Phoenix, I mean, same question to you. I'm an artist, content creator. How can you in Universe Contemporary help me? I've got needs.
Yeah, so I think first, happy to have a quick conversation with you. I think that before you go to anyone and seek them, you have needs, you should be super clear about what it is you need. And even if you're like, well, I don't know exactly what to ask for, be specific about that and just say that straight up. And then also too, take a moment, instead of thinking I don't know what to ask for, put yourself in a place of having achieved your goals, work backwards from there. That way you can provide a bit more clarity other than I don't know what to ask for to the person you're asking for help, because then they're not going to really have the opportunity to help you as well as they might be, right? As a consultant, like, Dan said he does many things, right? But you want to be as specific as possible when you approach a consultant like myself or Dan or Robbie's company, because that lets us know how we can help you, right? So I would just say, be specific, do a bit of research, go to your place of achievement, see yourself having achieved that place, at least be able to communicate what you want to achieve, where you see yourself, and then again, try to work backwards and come up with 3 bullet points, right, of what you may or what you feel like you may need assistance with.
That's great.
So once that's articulated, then I know where to go with you from there. But generally, we work in fashion, sports, art, and music. So we can consult you on anything. Generally, we work with large corporations, but we also work with individual artists with high impact NFTs or programs. So we're happy to, we're happy also to simply chat, but to optimize our time together, let that chat lead to solutions for you.
That's awesome. Thank you so much. I think each of guests today, if you are so inspired, in the chat, definitely drop your contact information. Robbie did that, so that's great. So people can access you and reach out with additional questions. So we have like 5 more minutes. So before we sign off, so 5 minutes. So I'm just going to set up this sentence, and I just want to hear your thoughts, just a couple of words on this, right? So we know this technology, all kinds of things are happening. It's still very early, right? It's still very early, and it's a little bit chaotic right now under the hood and all the shifts that are happening right now. But what is one thing that you are excited about after a bit of the chaos? And maybe we'll start with you, Robbie.
The technology, right? I mean, the technology is going to outlive all this hype, and after a point, the technology is going to go so much into the background. It'll be just like the internet of these times, right? Nobody is going to realize that they're dealing with NFTs. And what I'm looking forward is the improvement in the user experience itself, right? At this point, the crypto user experience is not up to the mark. So we have to do a lot of work for every single internet citizen of this world to come out of the Web 3.0 and be able to access NFTs, DeFi, crypto, all those sort of things. So when these things happen, and these things would happen in the next 5 to 10 years, that's when I would be super happy.
Awesome. Dan, it's a little bit of chaotic right now. Like Robbie said, user experience, still developing. What are you most excited about after this early stage?
Yeah, I think that's one of the big issues I know a lot of places are working on, that I've spent a lot of time working on as well, is that idea of taking it from this first gen of not really elitist, but a very high point of entry into this level where it's understandable and accessible to as many people as possible. So they don't have to be coming to people who are devs and saying, right, I need you to do this and build me a smart contract. They've got the tools, they can go off and do it themselves with a bit of work and a bit of research. They can understand what they're doing. And then it starts to really open up to everyone. And that's really what I want to see, is it really opening up the space to anyone who wants to get involved, so that they can do it at the level they want.
That's awesome. Thank you. Thank you. And Lady Fee, like you said, it's early. The shift is happening right now. What are you most excited about once we get over this hump?
I'm excited about culture empowering themselves collectively, and that culture creating kind of spore networks across the planet where they'll reach out and support each other. Different nodes of communities will tap into one another and be supportive of one another. That's what I'm most looking forward to. And also to an alternative way of thinking of, quote, making a living as an artist. Again, right now, there's a lot of focus on just straight up commerce. And I think that we, being on this wheel, aren't giving ourselves the opportunity to look at more sustainable and regenerative ways to use the technology so that it benefits us, and so that it feels reciprocal and regenerative economically as well as culturally. Yeah, I don't want to get too long-winded, but I think
totally cool.
Socially, what I'm looking forward to with the technology.
That is amazing. Well, I'll, kind of capping this off, what I'm excited about is you, Lady Phoenix, you, Ravi, and you, Dan, amazing professionals in your space. Everyone that's tuning in, these folks are solid and legit. Definitely check them out, hit them up, reach out to them. There's a lot of chaos and noise. And so we definitely, at the Bushwick Film Festival, I've done, my part to reach out to, some serious people in the space that are really doing things to add value to the community. And so when you have questions, like we said, it's also very important to that source of where you're going to get those answers. So definitely hit them up, check them out, support. And as each of them said during this, you've heard during this talk, is about building community. So, I mean, make a friend, reach out, share your information, and let's start to build from here. And same to you, my friends on this panel, Dan, Robbie, Lady Fee, let's stay connected. Let's keep it going. Thank you guys for being a part of the 14th annual Bushwick Film Festival Dimensions, and we had our metaverse experience. So this is so exciting. Hope you enjoy the rest of your day, and we'll see you all soon. Peace.
Thank you, Rod. Thank you, Metaverse. Thank you, Bushwick Film Festival.
Thank you all.
Thanks everyone for having me. It's been
Good day.
great stuff. Thanks so much.